Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. My name is Dr. Leslie Phillips, and I am your host. And I'm also joined in the studio by Corey, the show's producer.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have a fabulous guest who I will be introducing in a moment. But before I do so, let me just tell you a little bit about Unlocking Your Truth in case you're listening for the first time. Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show, and it's all about metaphysics and spirituality. So we love to talk about anything in that realm, and every week we have a different topic that we explore, and we also invite you to send and call in with your questions. Now, we're broadcasting live across the Fraser Valley on 101.7 FM, and you can also live stream us on civl.ca. And if you want to send a question to a future show, you can write to info@drlesliephillips.com. And the phone number in the studio is 604-504-7441, extension 4142. So today's guest is a lady called Atherton Drenth, and I'm very fascinated to talk to Atherton because there are some details in her background that are quite similar to mine. So we both have a scientific background and have become intuitive healers.
Now, both ladies.
Oh, yeah. Now, Atherton is the author of two books. One is called The Intuitive Dance, Building, Protecting, and Clearing Your Energy. And the other book is called Following Body Wisdom. And she's also appeared in a documentary called Voyage to Betterment as one of 12 experts, alongside other internationally renowned physicians, researchers, and pioneers. And she is a clairvoyant, a medical intuitive, a holistic energy practitioner, and she facilitates transformational healing for her clients. And she works with people all over the world, in person and long distance. So, Atherton, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. And I wonder if you could help us get to know you a little bit better by telling us a little bit about your journey from having a more scientific, technical background into what you do now as an energy healer and intuitive.
Well, it all came about as the result of a near-death experience. I had been ill for quite a while, and I had been working with various physicians trying to uncover what the problem was. And I got everything from "there's nothing wrong with you" to "we think you have MS. And the bottom line was that nobody knew what was wrong with me, and nobody could help me, and I was wasting away. And one day I collapsed at work, and I had been suffering from severe migraines and severe insomnia for at least 5 years. And I went from not being able to sleep to not being able to wake up and not being able to walk. And I became very weak. And one day I was lying in bed, and I had been sleeping for about 24 hours a day, when I woke up one day to find an angel standing beside my bed, and she said, "Atherton, it's your choice. You can live or you can die." And at first, I was just so relieved to know that I could leave, and I just said, "Take me. I can't do this anymore." And as I started to float up out of my body, I felt this beautiful, supreme bliss of divine love, and everything was going very, very white and very bright, and I could feel myself floating up out of my body. And then all of a sudden, I realized that I was leaving my husband to raise two teenagers on his own, and I didn't think that that was fair. So I asked if I could come back. And I heard a bit of a chuckle, and the next thing I knew, I was back in my body, and I woke up the next morning and I was able to sit up and start walking again. Over the next 2 weeks, I had several very unique synchronicitous events happen, and I was led to go and see a gentleman who did energy work. I'd never heard of it, didn't know anything about it. And I was really quite shocked the first time I met him. Because he did his sessions in an open room, so you got to watch him work on other people, and I was quite horrified, actually, because I thought it looked incredibly hokey. And yet, when I got up on the table, and the minute he touched me, he knew exactly what was wrong with me. He said that he thought I had celiacs. So I went back to the doctors, and they did a biopsy, and it was confirmed, and it was one of the worst cases of undiagnosed celiacs that the specialists had ever seen. So they told me it would be at least 2 years before I could go back to work. And this young man said, well, let's see. And I started doing intense work with him over the next 3 months. And he had me back at work in 3.5 months. And then one day out of the blue, he told me he could train me to do what he did. And I thought he was nuts. But I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. I will give it a try. And it took me a year to get certified. And I had a full-time practice within a very short period of time. And I've never looked back since.
Well, that's an amazing story, Atherton. And is that the origin of the first book that you wrote, Following Body Wisdom, by learning to follow the wisdom of your own body in order to heal yourself, that led you to a deeper understanding? Or is it a combination of that and the people that you've now worked with yourself?
It was a combination of both, because, as I was going through my own healing journey, and I spent a lot of time with this gentleman by the name of Larry Steele, and I'd be sitting there and I'd be watching him and talking to him and asking him questions, and I couldn't understand why I had to go through this in order to find what he did. And I was simply amazed at watching how he was helping other people. Just to give you a case in point, my very first day there, and I was sitting in his office, and I was actually getting ready to leave because I was just so shocked. This was just too far outside of my realm. The door opened up, and an elderly woman and an older gentleman were carrying a woman into the office, and the older woman was about in her 80s, and the other couple, they were in their mid-60s, and they laid this woman out across from me, and they started to unwrap her leg, and her leg was jet black. Now, having been a medical technologist and having worked in a hospital, I know gangrene when I see it. And I looked at them and I said, shouldn't you be in a hospital? And she said to me, she says, I've just been discharged. I'm American and they want to amputate my leg. But if I agree to this, she said, my husband and I have to sell our home. My elderly mother has to sell her home, and we're all going to be on welfare. We heard about energy work, so we're going to give it a try. Over the next 3 months, every time I went down to get energy work done, this couple would come through the door. And I watched this woman's leg go from black to purple to green to blue to pink, to her walking in the door perfectly healed. I saw so many miraculous things, and all I could think is, why do not more people know about this? So then as I was doing my training and being a part of that, again, there's this sense of amazement. How come people don't know this? But there's no frame of reference. There's no, if you had said to people 17 years ago, oh, I'm seeing somebody who does energy work, you would have gotten this look of blank confusion. So there was no common language. So I thought, well, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to explain to people what energy work is and how it works, put in some examples of how I've helped people so that people have context, in the hopes that people would start to understand it, give it more a common understanding.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah. And okay, so that's how you came to write your first book. And can you tell us some more about how your practice developed once you learned how to do energy healing from this chap that you were training with, Larry Steele?
Well, what he would have you do is, once you had finished the training, he would have you do case studies and hand them in. So what what we would do is we would go out and we would look for 20 volunteers, and we would get them to sign a consent form and then have them agree to 4 one-hour sessions. And that would be, they were well aware of the fact that I was just learning, I was just getting my certification, that this was something totally new and different, but they were open to the experience. And it was through that process that out of that 20 people, 10 people, once the study was over, said, well, can I come back and see you? So by that time, I had been in business long enough to know that I needed to have some sort of structure set in place. So I had a room set up in my home. I knew what hours I wanted to work. I knew what I wanted to charge. So I just started scheduling people in. And as I got busier and busier seeing clients in the evenings on weekends, that gave me the confidence to realize that I could leave my full-time corporate job and be helping people full-time. And that's how I developed my practice.
And you describe yourself as being a clairvoyant as well as a healer. So presumably, and a medical intuitive.
Yes.
So can you tell us more about how you work with your patients? Are you actually able to see inside their bodies, see their energy fields? What is a day in the life of Atherton Drenth like?
Okay. So I explain to people that that as a clairvoyant, I can see their energy fields. Now, I explain to people I don't see with my human eyes. I see through my third eye and feel through my hands. And I am able to find the blocks in their energy field. And we know that if there's a block in the energy field, they can have problems physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. And my job is to go in and find out where those blocks are and then work with them to help them to release it. So I say to people that I see myself as being a guide on their healing journey, and I'm here to walk beside them. We don't do anything their mind can't handle and their body can't accept. Their body's very wise. It knows exactly what it needs, and my job is to listen to it and then to communicate that information back to the client and then work with them to unlock the block. And then that's what we do using various different healing modalities. I explain to people that I'm not a doctor. I don't prescribe and I don't diagnose. Just because I know things doesn't mean I'm the expert. I think that anybody who is undergoing working with a healer, that they need to understand that they are in charge of the healing. They're the ones that decide where it's going to go. I also tell people that I can read their energy. I can't read their mind, so I do ask questions for that reason. I find that the body speaks in very simplistic language, and if you can give yourself permission to listen to those statements without judgment, it's fascinating where it will take you. So for example, somebody may come in and they're suffering from migraines, and you connect to their energy field once you have permission, and you ask the body about the headache, and you may hear a statement is, I don't love myself. Well, what has that got to do with a headache? So you repeat that back to the client, and the client will say, well, what does that have to do? I don't know. We just need to listen to the statement. So I just want you to hold that statement, I don't love myself, and let's see what's lighting up in the body. And once you do that, the body will start to go to the liver, and there's anger there, and all of a sudden a movie will open up for me, and I can see that in my mind's eye. There's been a huge argument with an adult. It looks like someone that you're very close to. It looks very close in your age. Are you married? Yes, I am. Have you had an argument with your husband recently? Well, yes, we just had an argument 3 days ago. And this is how you start tracking. And then that argument with your husband may lead to the fact that I get really angry about this particular statement. And it was something my father always said to me as a child growing up. And now I have a boss who says the same thing to me. So now I know I've got a hook. And now we're working with the hook, and we're pulling it into consciousness so that they can start to come to a different conclusion about what they think is the truth, but it's really the lie.
Mm-hmm. And, in your practice, now, of course, everybody's unique, but are there some common themes that you see time and time again that are kind of like a statement of the state that we're in, humankind, or is everybody truly unique?
Well, everybody is unique, but I would have to say that when you get right down to it, and it's one of the reasons I wrote my second book, is that when you get right down to it, everybody's suffering from the same issues of self-confidence and low self-esteem, because there are beliefs that they have formed at whatever age, usually very young, that they think are the truth, but it's really the lie. And they don't understand how their ego is manipulating them into believing something that is making them sick and that they can change their mind. So I end up doing a lot of self-esteem and self-confidence work in my practice.
Right. Yeah, no, I would agree with you. That does seem to be a very common underlying belief that many of us are dealing with. Well, thank you so much. It's now, listeners, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie, and today we're having a wonderful discussion with Atherton Drenth about intuition and about energy healing and about Atherton's journey from being a scientist to an intuitive and energy healer. We're going to take a short break now for some commercials, but we will be back after these few short messages with more interesting insights. And you're listening, by the way, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie on CIVL on 101.7 FM, and you can live stream on civl.ca, and you can also listen to the podcast on drlesliephillips.com. Welcome back, listeners. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. My name's Dr. Leslie Phillips, and I am your host. And Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. And today we've been enjoying a lovely discussion with Atherton Drenth. And she's been telling us about her journey from being a scientist, a technologist, to now what she does, which is a medical intuitive energy healer and clairvoyant. And Atherton is the author of 2 books. One of them is called The Intuitive Dance, and that's her latest book. And her other book is Following Body Wisdom. And we were talking about following body wisdom before the break. And so now I'd be really interested to know some more about your latest book, The Intuitive Dance. And so maybe you can explain briefly what that's all about.
Certainly. So the intuitive dance teaches the reader how to reduce stress and anxiety by learning how to overcome the negative self-talk of the ego by using their natural, innate intuitive abilities. I've learned from experience from my private practice that the true source of anxiety and stress is caused by that little voice in the back of our minds telling us that we will never amount to anything. And it's that ego voice that a lot of us refer to as our inner crazy. And I think it's the aspect of the ego that never stops talking and makes us feel worthless. It affects our self-worth and our self-esteem. And as a result of this, it affects how we act in relationships, at home, at work, and anything else that's going on in our lives in general.
Great. And now in your book, I was fascinated to read on your website that you were talking about a technique called vertical access, and that this is the most powerful grounding technique that you have ever learned. And regular listeners to the show will know that I'm such a strong advocate of grounding, grounding, grounding. We talk about it a lot. And so I'd love you to tell us more about the vertical axis. And if you're willing, perhaps talk our listeners through.
Certainly, I'd be happy to. So the vertical axis is a technique that grounds you both to heaven and earth at the same time. And what it does is it helps to stabilize your energy field, and it brings you into direct alignment to being connected to everything. And when you do that, it helps to clear the mental chatter, still the mind. It helps you to reduce the fear. It helps you to understand how to reduce the stress and anxiety in your life. It's easier to make decisions. It creates a very firm foundation for meditation. And more than anything, I find that it makes it easier for you to manage your emotions. I find that being fully grounded helps you to not only stay calm, cool, and collected through the day, but it also helps you to sleep better at night if you do it at bedtime. So the vertical axis is very simple to do. You can do it in less than a minute every day. I usually recommend that people do it in the morning and in the evening. And what you do is you imagine or pretend that you have a root coming down from your tailbone, and it goes down deep into the earth. And as it does that, there are roots that form from the base of your feet as well. They can pass through anything, whether it be concrete or stone or dirt. They go deep into the earth, and I have them imagine them going down for miles and miles. And then I have the client ask to connect to the intelligence of nature. Now, when they connect to the intelligence of nature, they feel this energy coming up through those roots, and it's very warm like water. And I have them imagine or pretend that they're drawing that energy up through their roots and up through their legs, their body, up into their arms, their neck, and into their head. When it reaches like a flower, and then that energy flows down over their body like water through a fountain. As that's happening, then I have them turn their attention to being inside their heads and looking up towards the heaven, and then ask to be connected to spiritual intelligence. When they're connected to spiritual intelligence, they see a beam of light coming down from the heavens. When it touches the top of their head, it's very warm like sunlight. They're drawing that energy down through their bodies, down through their roots, and then imagining themselves sitting in their heart, watching the energy from the intelligence of nature come up, the energy from the spiritual intelligence coming down, and then they ask the two energies to come together. And as they come together, it's like sunlight dancing on the water. There is this sense of love and connectedness to everything. I have them fill their energy field with that love from the divine and from the Earth Mother, sending it out to their field, sending it out to their loved ones, out to their communities, and more importantly, out to the entire planet, so that they can feel that connection with the One.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Atherton. It's actually very, very similar to the techniques that I teach. So I can vouch that they work, listeners. So now the other thing that I was interested in is intuitive ethics. So I assume that you operate by a code of intuitive ethics. So what are intuitive ethics? What do you mean by that?
So intuitive ethics, it's basically 6 principles that I've come up with, because as people become more aware of their intuition, they're also aware that other people are intuitive as well. And when we are developing our intuition, I think it's good for us to be very clear about how we create loving and firm boundaries, so that we're not violating other people's boundaries, but we're also protecting ourselves from having our boundaries violated. So the 6 principles are as follows. I will say what the principles are, and then I'll go back and explain each one. The first one is just because you know doesn't mean you do. The second is wait to be asked. Then only do as asked. If you are not asked but wish to help, send love silently and hand it over to God. Ask, is it mine or does it belong to someone else? And then last, be honest. Now the first one, just because you know doesn't mean you do, is just because you can read somebody else's energy field doesn't give you the right to go running up and say, oh, look what I found in your energy field. Oh, this is wrong with you. Oh, that's wrong with you. You haven't been asked. You don't share that information. So just because you know doesn't mean you do.
Yeah, thank you, Atherton.
If you are picking it.
I just wanted to say I completely agree with you, and that's one of my bugbears, because there's a lot of these TV shows where they show the intuitive, the medium, getting a flash of insight, and then immediately is under obligation to go and tell this person. And I operate by the exact same ethic that you do. That yeah, just because you know, it's not the same as having been asked. So great, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. So the next one.
That's okay. So the next one is wait to be asked. So then if you have seen something in somebody's field and somebody comes to you and says, oh, you know, I'm not feeling very well, what do you feel? I will ask them for more clarity. So what exactly are you asking me to do? Well, you know, are you sensing anything in my field that might be out of alignment? Yes, there is. This is what it is. Then I will only tell them that. I won't go on ad nauseum and, oh, by the way, you know, I see this and this and this and this. You know, you've asked me a question, I've answered the question. If I'm working with somebody and there's something going on in their field and I haven't received permission or they haven't asked, but I'm concerned for them, then I'll just send them love. I'll just say, I love you, and I'll just hand it over to God, because this is honoring choice and free will.
Right.
When you're intuitive, you're also picking up energy from other people, so you can start to have problems yourself. You can be having lunch with a friend, and all of a sudden your tooth hurts. And you think, oh my goodness, I've got to go to the dentist. I'm going to have to, I hope I don't need a filling. And then you find out your friend's just had a root canal. Well, then I'm feeling her energy. I'm asking, is this my toothache or her toothache? No, it's hers. Then I can drop it. I don't need to do anything with my tooth. And I think the most important thing is being honest. And I think this is particularly important when you're dealing with children, because children are so highly intuitive. And if a child comes up to you and says, oh, mommy, do you have a headache? And you think, oh, well, I don't want to burden them with that headache. You've just been dishonest. It's far better to say to the child, you're right. Thank you very much. I do have a headache. It's nothing you need to be concerned about. Why don't you go and play with your sister? And what that does is that honors the child's intuition. It means that you're being honest, but you're also letting them know that they don't need to fix it, that they didn't cause it, they didn't create it, and they don't need to fix it. So not only are you giving them the confidence to understand how they're reading people, but you're also teaching them they don't need to take responsibility.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing those guidelines. And because we're on the topic, I maybe I'll share a couple of extra ones. Because, a couple of the additional ethical guidelines that I operate from is I don't know about you, but I get a lot of people who want me to predict their future for them.
Yes.
And so one of my ethical guidelines is, I won't predict your future for you. I'll read your energy in the present moment and give you information to empower you to make your own decisions, because the future is only a thought form anyway. You create your own reality. So how about you on future predictions? Do you get people asking you to do that for them?
Yes, all the time. And I do the same thing. I say that I'm not a psychic, I'm an intuitive. I'm happy to share what information I am picking up in your energy field. But I'm not going to interfere with your future. And it doesn't mean that they can't change what I'm sensing or feeling in their energy field, but that's totally outside of my purview.
Yeah. And the other one is I never tell anyone what they should do. I give them information to empower them to make their own decisions.
Yes, and I think it's so important that, especially as intuitives and medical intuitives, that people be empowered to realize that they have the right to make choice. And we're not there to judge. We're only there to be honest and tell them what we're sensing and feeling, showing them, and then handing it over to them and saying, so here you go. Now you decide what you want to do. They will often say, well, I don't know what to do. Okay, well, you don't know what to do about what? Give me some clarity. Well, I don't know what to do about this situation. Okay, so now you're asking me for my opinion. Yes, I'm asking for your opinion. Then in my opinion, I would offer the following advice. You could do A, B, or SAC.
It's really interesting. Working with people especially can be very challenging, because they don't know exactly what to ask. And also, when you work with them, I find when I've worked with people, I'll be looking for a trauma that happened to them in the past that's causing their issue today, and you come up with the trauma, and you ask them about it, and they say there was no trauma, and then like 10 minutes later, go, oh yeah, I remember that now. And it's really interesting working with people, because you're also not just working you're working with every aspect of the human being as well, not just the spiritual, or not just the physical, not just the emotional, not just the mental. You're working with this whole thing called an individual.
Yes.
And it's so much fun. I mean, I do something very similar to you. I'm an intuitive. I just look at somebody and I can just there, and I'll give you one example, and maybe you have something similar. I was working on this one gentleman one time, and I was looking at him, and I said, "You've got a problem with your right ankle." And I explained that sometimes I'm a little dyslexic when I do that. Right ankle could be left ankle. said, it looks like it's broken.
Yes.
Like you've got a broken ankle or you've broken and it's really sore. He says, no. I said, I'm sure of it. Like I can see it when you were a kid before you recall. I said, do you play sports? Oh, yeah, I play sports. What do you play? Hockey. I said, you've never hurt your ankle playing hockey? He says, no, I've never done that. And I'm looking at him and I'm looking at him, but I see this issue. He says, no, mind you, my twin brother did. You know, like you just wasted 10 minutes of my life here.
Yeah, exactly.
and
yeah, I'll pick something up in somebody's field and I'll say, what's going on here? Oh, nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. No. And then they'll come back 3 weeks later. In that last session you were talking about the left shoulder and this, that, and the other thing. Well, the minute I walked out of the office, I knew exactly what you were talking about. So can we go back there? Well, we don't need to because I cleared it because it was obvious, and we don't need to go into the story. It's done.
Yeah. I have so many of these stories. I just love them, and the one that I think was the strongest one for me in a learning experience was working on a lady one night at a party. Actually, she came up to me, and she said, "I'm having some issues." And I looked at her, and I looked at her, and I looked at her, and I said, "You've got problems with your kidneys.
Mm-hmm.
There's an issue with your kidneys." She said, "Oh no, the doctor told me I have a liver issue." I said, "No, there's a kid." I said, "I'm not disagreeing with what the doctor said. I'm just looking at a kidney issue." I said, "And what we can do is clear." She said, "No." She says, "No, you're wrong." And we went from there. And anyway, I cleared her. She called me the next morning. She had to phone a few people to get my number. She called me up. She says, "Corey," she says, "I came home." She said, "And I passed the kidney stone." And she said, "I went back to my doctor and everything was fine." And I run into her a few times, and she loves to tell that story as well. But it's sometimes there's such clarity, and people try to say no. And they're looking for sometimes I think they're looking for something deeper, something more important, or something the opposite, something less important.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I find that, you're working with somebody who has a health issue, and it keeps going back to one particular statement. And when they finally get it, the reaction is always the same. First of all, they get really, really angry that something that was so simple to resolve took them so long to get. Yeah. And then they go through this skepticism, like, how could something that simple create this complex issue? And then they're related. They finally figured it out.
Yeah. And also, I have one more question. I'll turn back to Leslie. But one of the other things that I dealt with quite a bit in the past is what I call secondary gain. People are ill because they choose to be ill because of the attention they get from being ill. Yes. And depression is one of those things. A lot of people stay in that place of depression because everybody rallies around them and makes them so, oh, it's okay. And it's difficult to determine. But we had one lady, Leslie and I both worked on, you'll remember this one, Leslie, and she had a crink, I don't know if you can see me, but she had a crink in her neck like this, and she walked like this all the time. And she came to me, and I worked on her. Leslie looked at her, and we both came up with past lives. She had been hung 3 times in her past life. And so I said, okay. So I worked with her, and I got her up straight. It was very nice. And then she came back to me a few days later, a couple of weeks later, and she was just livid. What happened? She went this way. And I said, but don't you understand that what you're just telling, like, because she's uncomfortable this way because she hasn't been able to learn how to sleep that way and all this stuff, right? I said, but do you not understand what you're telling me? That the issue isn't physical. Obviously, if you were here and you've gone here, something has caused this. And I worked on her again. I got her straight, and then she just went right back to this side again. And what it was, what I gathered from her is that she wasn't ready to let that go in any way, shape, or form, and nobody could tell her different. And she had to stay with that story for a certain period of time until her all 4 of her aspects, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, all came into alignment and allow her to release that. It's
Yep.
you run into that once in a while. People are looking for cures instead of a healing, and don't know the difference between healing and cure, and it's quite interesting. Do you get experiences like that as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we could talk for hours about and share stories. I'm thinking about one woman in particular. Her sister had asked if I'd work with her, and she had been unable to leave her house for 3 years because of severe environmental sensitivities. And by the time I got to the second session, I realized that there was a deeply emotional connection to not being leaving the house, because it was the only way she could keep her husband from leaving her. And it came up in the conversation, and she hung up on me, and I thought, oops. And then the next day, her sister, who was also a client of mine, came into the office, and she said, I understand you had quite the conversation with my sister yesterday. And I said, yes. And she said, well, I just want to let you know, I know you can't discuss it because it's private, but I just want you to know that whatever you said to her was right, and that really upset her, but I just wanted to let you know that you were right. I said, well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. But because, yes, for some people, there is a very strong emotional need. It keeps the spouse engaged. It keeps the children at home. So people who've been in car accidents, if they're involved in a lawsuit, I can't tell you how many times I've had to say to them, when the lawsuit is resolved, come back and see me, then I'll be able to help you, because they have to stay sick with the insurance company.
Yeah.
And that's so frustrating, because there could be so much more money saved on healthcare and insurance if we could just do what we need to do to help these people to heal, instead of having to wait to go through these. And these lawsuits can last anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and it's a tragedy to watch how these people suffer.
Yeah.
Also recognition too. I think looking and recognizing these issues in people. My thought process just went right out the door here right now. But yeah, I look at some people, and for instance, depression. Working with people with depression, and I think you touched on a few things there. A lot of what we are and what we do is choice, even though it's not a conscious choice, but we choose. I mean, if I used to be if I woke up in the morning and I didn't want to go to work, and I said to myself, if I had the flu, I wouldn't have to go to work, and not 5 minutes later, I would be sick.
Yeah.
And we do that, but we can do that on the opposite side as well. And I'm again concentrating a little bit more on depression here, talking about depression. Depression is one of those things that people say, well, I'm depressed, and the doctor said, well, you're going to be depressed, and you have to on drugs, and you have to be on there for a long time. But I always ask people, so you're depressed. Are you depressed 24 hours a day? No, not really. Are you depressed 12 hours a day? And then you find out that, well, I'm depressed. That's because they only recognize the depression when they can focus on it, but otherwise they're not really focused on it. So it is a changeable state.
Yes. Yeah.
Just let's find the trigger to change it.
Great. Well, on that note, we have to go to another commercial break, and you're listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie, and we've been talking about medical intuition with our guest Atherton Drenth, and we'll be back after these few short messages. Welcome back, listeners, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. We're broadcasting on 101.7 FM across the Fraser Valley. You can live stream us on civl.ca and listen to the podcast on drlesliephillips.com. As you may know, Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. And today we've been having a delightful conversation with Atherton Drenth, who is a clairvoyant, a medical intuitive, and also the author of 2 books, one called The Intuitive Dance and another one which is about the following body wisdom. And so we've actually reached the part in the show where we actually open it up to some of our listeners' questions. So would you be willing to take a clairvoyant look at some of the things that our listeners have written in about Atherton?
Sure, let's give it a try.
Great. So Corey, looks like you've gone on mute for some reason. Well, there you go.
Well, yeah, I was just pushing some papers here for a second. I have a question here from Lana, and we use fictitious names, of course, Atherton, because we don't want people be embarrassed.
They don't. Yeah, they don't always want people to recognize them.
And here's a very interesting question, and maybe because you have more tools in your tool belt than other people would, I think I might figure out what your answer is before you even give it. But it's a very oblique question. So what healing? She doesn't tell us what's wrong, but she said, "What healing treatment do you think will assist me the most with my neurological condition? Vestibulo-ocular reflex treatment in New York, hypnosis, or emotional freedom technique at Hollyhock?"
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last one. Did you say emotional freedom technique?
EFT at Hollyhock.
Yeah, at Hollyhock.
So the first one was vestibular ocular therapy. The last one was emotional freedom. What was the second one?
Hypnosis.
Oh, hypnosis.
And I would say it would be a combination of the first and the last. She needs to do both. There's something locking down in her ocular system, and the EFT is going to take care of the emotional component. So she would need to do both.
That's great.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Dr. Leslie.
I think that's good. I think that's good. I think we can go on to the next question.
I have an answer too. Whichever works. Okay. We'll add some more here. Just let me gather my thoughts again. Okay, here's one. And this one is from Marnie. Marley says, "I've recently come out of several months of inner work involving meditation, prayer, fasting, and intensive energetic clearing through cutting cords. While I have committed to this for easily over 250 hours collectively, the results are less than desirable, considering the investment of energy, pure intention, and commitment. I've also been working in the physical and not just sitting around on my laurels wishing and hoping for manifestations. What is now required to move the needle on receiving what I have been seeking? Thank you."
Well, first of all, cutting cords shouldn't be that complicated.
No.
In my personal opinion. Secondly, you can cut cords, but if there's been a karmic etheric connection with that person, then that needs to be resolved. So you can cut cords until the cows come home, but if there's an etheric pattern or karmic etheric pattern that needs to be resolved, quick and easy and simple to do, and then giving yourself permission to get out of the way and let the universe do what it needs to do to make that resolve. Because anytime there has been a very complex karmic pattern between yourself and someone else and nothing seems to resolve it, then that's when you need to give yourself permission to hand it over to God or to a guardian angel, let them resolve it, and then stand back and then accept the outcome. Because sometimes you can have, there can be a beautiful outcome for it, and other times you just realize there's nothing more you can do. You've done everything you can, and now you need to walk away and allow that relationship to die a natural death.
Yeah, and one thing I would add is the distinction between working as body and working as spirit. Bodies use effort. Everything a body does uses effort. When we work as spirit, there's no effort involved. So one of the things I'm seeing with Marnie is that you're going into effort and you're trying to approach a spiritual healing or a spiritual matter by the body trying very hard to do it. And so it's just another way of saying what Atherton said, which is let go and let God. Get out of your own way, because it's your ego, it's your body consciousness that's been doing all that hard work. And as spirit, that we don't use effort. And the other thing is expectations, letting go of expectations. And then the third thing I might say is it just looks like there's some programming, some belief systems from your upbringing that play into that when you work, you've got to work really hard, and then you get results.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, because there's an expectation on how you expect things to turn out, and miracles are not always the way you expect them to turn out. And if you start dictating how you think it should be presented to you, it could be happening right in front of you, but because it's not happening exactly the way you think it should, you're missing it.
Exactly. Oh, definitely. Especially when you use that term manifestations. And in this case, she's trying to manifest something, but what she's doing is she's throwing all the mud against the wall and hoping something will stick to create that manifestation. Mm-hmm. And that's not the way it works. I mean, you just have to let it go. You know, have to be able to put it out there and allow it to be, if that's the way you choose to have it done. And like Leslie, like you said, bringing the physical in to try and create something, like people are looking for healing, but they're looking for a cure, but they actually need a healing, which is one's physical, one's spiritual. Mm-hmm. Great answers. This is a wonderful get together we're having. Okay, here's one that we were talking about earlier. That was kind of interesting. It's almost as if this was perfectly suited for you, Atherton. I'm doing great. I took a class. This is from Jamie. And I'm not sure if Jamie is a male or a female. I'm doing great. I took a class last night, and the woman teaching did something which I know you have also done in sessions with me. I'm wondering if it's a gift or a skill. When I was doing your grounding exercise for the first time, as I was creating a flow of energy from my first chakra down to the center of the earth, you told me it looked like I was traveling with it to the center of the earth, which is exactly what I was doing in my mind. Last night in class, the teacher was telling students that instead of grounding, they were going up out of their bodies. Anything you have to say about this would be of interest to me. Is this seeing the flow of energy? I assume it could be sensed with any of the clairs.
Yes, you can sense it in any way. I would caution about going to the center of the earth. Mother Earth has asked us not to connect to her core at this time because she is undergoing so much turmoil, which is why she's gifting us permission to connect to her soul, which is the intelligence of nature. And then when realization of leaving your body, as opposed to allowing the energy to flow up and then bringing down the energy from the spiritual consciousness down in. Because you want to stay connected to your physical body, and you want to stay connected to heaven and earth while still being connected to your energy field. When you start to see yourself lifting up and out, then you can start moving yourself into what I would call an astral experience, which is a totally different ballgame.
Right. Can you just read the question one more time, Corey?
I can, if that will help. I'm doing great. I took a class last night, and the woman teaching did something which I know you have also done in sessions with me. So basically what you've done, Leslie, in sessions with her. Now, I'm wondering if it's a gift or a skill. When I was doing your grounding exercise for the first time, as I was creating a flow of energy from my first chakra down to the center of the earth, you told me it looked like I was traveling with it to the center of the earth.
And that would have been a commentary on I wouldn't have been. So you want to stay in your body while you're grounding. You don't want to be moving your consciousness with it.
And she says, which is exactly what I was doing with my mind. Last night in class, the teacher was telling students that instead of grounding, they were going up out of their bodies. Yeah. Anything you have to say about this would be interesting to me. Is this seeing the flow of energy? So she's obviously talking about the woman seeing them go out of their bodies. And seeing the flow of energy. I assume it would sense any of the cares.
So a good teacher, obviously, can watch what's going on energetically with their students and see that they're not grounding and see if they're moving out of their bodies. So that's probably what was happening. And let's just see. The other thing is, if you do find that you're leaving your body, then the thing to do is ground more, because the more you ground, the more it helps you anchor your consciousness in your body. And one of the things that I'm seeing with this lady is that sometimes what can happen when you're meditating is stuff will come up. And sometimes the stuff that comes up is stuff that frightens you or you don't want to look at, and it will cause you to jump out of your body. And it looks to me like something came up in her third chakra that threw her out of her body a little bit. Something that perhaps she wanted to avoid going into. But I agree with everything that Atherton said as well. So maybe we've got time for one more question, do you think?
That's up to you. I've lost track of time here.
Let's do one more question, and then I think.
Okay, let me find one that I had one here, and it's sort of. Oh, here's one that's interesting. With Macy, how do we use our chakras to our highest good on a daily basis, and how do we maintain healthy chakras?
That's a big question.
It's only one sentence long.
Well, yeah, only one sentence long. So, in my experience, not only for myself but with my clients and my students, doing the vertical axis, so grounding every day, would help them to maintain a strong connection to heaven and earth, which would help to balance their chakras. I would also recommend doing it twice a day, and at least once a week doing a proper chakra meditation just to keep them toned and flowing properly.
That sounds like really good advice. And yes, ground, I call it running your energy, circulating the earth and cosmic energy, but it's the same thing. Just having an energy maintenance practice and a meditation practice where you're consciously circulating your energy and being consciously aware of what's going on in your chakras.
It's almost like having an interview mirror here. You guys are on the same wave. I have a very quick one here that we want to throw in, and I always think these are cute. Why am I still single? We're not laughing at you, by the way, person who sent it. And the person who sent it in, let's call her Nanny. And Nanny, we're not laughing at you. It's such a cute question, though, because we know why.
You know, people who ask me that question all the time, you've got to take a look at their field, and sometimes there's a contract that they want to be single, that they are quite happy being single, they like their own company, and they think that they should be in a relationship, and they talk themselves into needing a relationship, but they're quite happy not being in a relationship. So sometimes that's the bigger question. Are you really being honest with yourself? Do you really want to be in a relationship?
Yeah. And I'm seeing actually with this lady, one of the benefits right now for you is that your space isn't invaded by by the person that you're in a relationship with. Her energy actually looks quite centered to me and quite, stable. So the grass is always greener sometimes. Yeah.
And I would agree. I mean, she looks like she's really happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also feel that she has a concept of what she thinks a relationship and the person that she wants a relationship with should be like, but it's nothing close to what actually will bring her to her fullest. She's looking for the tall, dark-haired stranger with the deep eyes.
Well, the primary relationship for all of us is our relationship with, God, source energy, and ourselves, our inner being. So,
and be the one you're looking for.
Well, as Corey says, it would be delightful to be able to talk for longer, but unfortunately, we've reached the end of the show, Atherton. And so, I'm going to ask you two things. One, is there any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners? And then two, how can they get a hold of you if they want to connect with you?
Well, what I'd like to say is that I firmly believe that if everybody understood how simple it is to manage their own inner dialogue, that we would be a whole new society in one generation. I think it would make us better parents, more knowledgeable leaders, and more loving and compassionate human beings. I'm a strong believer in getting in touch with our intuition, and I'm a strong believer in the fact that we are all evolving into a higher level of consciousness, and it's time we work together to do that. As far as getting in touch with me, they can get in touch with me through my website, and it's www.athertondrenth.ca. And they can also find me on LinkedIn and Facebook by typing in my name.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And listeners, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie on 101.7 FM, broadcasting across the Fraser Valley and live streaming on CIVL. You can catch the podcast on drlesliephillips.com. And it's now time for Johnny Kay and Nurse Katie in the vinyl
Katie.
Spinner Lives On.
Yeah, and you'll love their show. They love to play music. So if you got 3 or 4 hours, grab a seat and just relax.
See you next week, 7 p.m. Pacific, Tuesdays.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesliephillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.